but I will never pick a job like that again because it's not who I am. And it's not where I can serve a company properly. And it's good to know that about yourself. When a person can look at something they've done and said, I did this, I tried this, it is one of the greatest accomplishment, confidence, achievements a person can have. You have to understand that that job you're applying to, your classmate, that person you sat beside every single day, is just applied to the same position. What makes you different than them? Oh. Knowledge is important. You need the knowledge, but have you used the knowledge, or how have you used it? So when I do get those students who come to me with the blank resumes, and this does happen, I can't tell a student not to apply to a job. I will never do that.
Hello, everyone. In today's podcast episode, we have Derek Smith, who works at the career advising at the University of Toronto, right? Okay, so we'll take a moment for introduction and we'll quickly jump to the questions. So can you please introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello. Hi, my name's Derek Smith. I'm a career strategist with the Academic Advising and Career Center. I've been with the university doing this role since 2017. However, I've been doing career advising. I can't believe I'm about to say this. This is my 20th year anniversary this year doing career advising. Wow. So since 2017, I've been here at UofT. And I actually work in two departments here. So I work with the Academic Advising and Career Center, which serves all students in the career and academic components. But I also spend half my time with the management department, with working with management students. I've been doing that since 2017 as well. Wow. The reason that a relationship got started is my predecessor was over there. And the management department, they have their co-op coordinators to the co-op department, but they don't have a career center themselves. And because the management department's across the street, no one would be coming over to this side. So they send me over there. So half the week I work with management students and half the week I work with the general population, although management students are welcome to come here as well. Okay. But I've been doing this now for 20 years. My goodness.
20 years. That's a lot of time.
Yes. I used to work at, it's known as TMU now, but I used to work at Ryerson. I worked not-for-profit with various clients for a long time as well in this field. And then I did independent for a few years. So I worked with some executives, some people looking for work for a few years, but I decided I wanted something more stable. So that's why I came to UofT. But I consider this my second job life. So I didn't graduate doing career counseling. So back, I won't give you dates, but when I graduated from university, I had a double degree. I had sociology and criminology. And did nothing with that.
Criminology, interesting.
Crime and deviance, criminology, very interesting stuff. But didn't really do much with it in the sense of it's a very specialized field. So because of, some natural abilities I have being able to talk to people and things like that, I went right into sales. I always did sales jobs, retail, stuff like that.
Wow.
And I always did very well in the presenting, but I'm a horrible closer. And that's what my bosses always couldn't stand about me is that, from a sales perspective, if a person says no 50 times, you ask them 51 if they want the product. But I always would ask, would you like this? They said no. And I'd be like, okay, great. And that would drive my bosses crazy because I always had the perspective of, if I did my job correctly and if a person says no, well, then I respect them as an adult to say no. Yeah. And that meant I had a lot of sales jobs because they didn't last very long. I can get them because I could talk, but I couldn't close for the life of me. And then what ended up happening is I took a position through network contact, actually, because after I did sales for a bit, I actually got into the fitness industry for a while. And I co-managed a gym for a little bit, a very large gym out in Vaughan. And, due to various circumstances, I decided to leave that. And when I was doing some networking actually with clients, I was like, hey, I'm looking for a job. I was actually going to the gym floor and saying, I'm looking for a job. Do you have anything? And someone offered me a position with a small company, which, they were nice people, but it turned out to be the worst job in my life.
Why?
My mom always gave me a piece of advice that I did not follow, which is don't quit a job when you're angry and don't quit a job without something else lined up. Well, I did both those things wrong. I quit the job when I was upset at my company at the time at the gym because they did some structural changes I didn't like. And this other job, I took it, but I didn't know anything about it. And it's like, oh, you people are nice. We get along here while you work out. I did not do any due diligence into the organization or research. I just took it. And it turned out to be like a horrible position for me. what ended up happening is we got bought out at some point, and I got restructured and lost my job. And it was one of the happiest days of my life when I lost that job.
Why?
Because I couldn't stand it. It was,
You were like genuinely happy
oh my
for
gosh,
losing your job?
I couldn't believe it. I mean, I was because it was miserable. It wasn't me at all, and it turned out these two nice people that I thought we got along with at the gym. We didn't work well together. Different, it's different when you have
The environment?
Yeah, it's just different when you know someone outside, but then you get to work with them 8 hours a day.
Oh.
And again, I didn't do my due diligence. There were actually lots of warning signs about the company as well, about how my previous person resigned as well from that place. So when I lost that job, I actually went out. This is hilarious. I actually went out that day. And this is when Blockbuster Video was still around, so I am dating myself a little bit. Rented 3 DVDs, the biggest thing of popcorn I can get, and just threw myself a party that I was unemployed. It was hilarious, but let me tell you, sometimes when you're... Anyway.
Usually do the opposite.
I know, but it was... If anybody's ever had a bad job and has lost it, they kind of get it a little bit. Because it was just a relief, right?
Yeah.
Now, this left me in an awkward situation because I was unemployed and I didn't know what to do. I was sick of doing sales. I can get those jobs. I didn't want to do it anymore. I could do, this job that I celebrated losing was more of an administrative position, office management, which is not me at all. I need something more active. I didn't know what to do. Now, thankfully, I was able, because I was laid off or let go, I was able to get government funding for free career coaching.
Wow.
So I took advantage of it. I'm like, okay, I'm stuck in my life. What the heck do I do with myself now? I mean, at this point, I've been out of school 5 years and just was lost. So I took advantage of the free career services that the government was paying for. I went through a bunch of personality assessment testing, which is actually something I was familiar with because it's one of the reasons I went into criminology is because I loved career assessment or personality assessment stuff. And I get to do it on myself for once instead of studying criminals. And actually, all the stuff that came up was interesting, was stuff that I knew about myself, but looked at a different light. And when I was actually part of a group looking at the facilitator who was presenting, which is something I've always loved to do is present, and watching her help people, I looked and said, that's what I want to do. I could take the skill sets of selling and talking to people, but I can instead use it to help people rather than selling them.
That's a good mixture.
And instead of having the pressure of, chasing someone to make them say yes after 50 no's, I didn't have to do that anymore. So after I went through the process and the program with them, I decided to actually meet with this person, my career counselor, on their own, and asked about their career and what their job was like. And it was like, this is stuff that's really hitting with me. Because I always loved to help people. I always worked in not-for-profit stuff with my church. I did a lot of help there, but nothing formally. And I'm like, this is kind of what I want to do. So I asked her how she got into career counseling, and she told me to go into the school she went to, and then she set me up with her supervisor.
Whoa.
And we had what's called, this is actually called an informational interview, which is one of the greatest ways of networking and job searching. And I got to interview with her boss, and she says, yeah, this is what it's all about. Now, to get into my field, you don't need school, because it's not a certified industry per se. Like certain industries, like be like a doctor or a lawyer, electrician, you need certifications. This one you don't to legally do this work, but no one's going to hire you without it. In the sense of like an organization, they're looking for the trainings or certifications.
So you should do like university degree?
Well, so I went back to school, actually went to college.
Okay.
So because I already had a 4-year degree, the college was able to do a fast-tracked program for me. So instead of 2 years, it was 1 year because I already had a lot of the stuff they're looking for. And it was fantastic. Very different experience compared to university. This was very hands-on.
After like 6 years?
It was like, yeah. So this is about 6 years now after I graduated. I'm doing this. Went back to school, did a full-time diploma, but had 2 internships, which was awesome because I get to practice this stuff. Wow. And that was it. I was like, this is awesome. So after that, I just jumped into the field. That I did not for profit for about 8 years, and then I went to what was formerly known as Ryerson. I did that for a few years, and then I did it privately for a few years, and then I ended up here in 2017 at UofT.
Wow, that's an amazing story. You actually gave me a hope because, like, for us, like, whenever you watch a movie, whenever you watch social media, you kind of understand people they're like propagating you that you have to be born someone, right? You were like first salesperson and you worked at the gym, and then you switch to career counseling, right? Like, I kind of understood that you don't like always land into like a right field for yourself. You just have to like search for it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great story, actually.
Yeah, and that's one thing actually we look at it. I don't know if we're jumping ahead here a little bit, but this is one thing we actually help with the students here is so many students think that whatever they're set on their diploma, one, that's the job they're going to get for the rest of their life.
Yep.
It's not. There's very few people who, there are some that do. I do a lot of alumni panels here, and I always ask alumni about how they got into the field and got through their story. And there have been some that said, I knew I was going to do this when I got here, and this is what I'm doing, and this is what I'm going to do. So that does happen. But most people have to realize that career journeys these days is not straight line. It's a curvy, adaptable line. I always tell people that to be successful, you need to have an open mind, be flexible, and take chances. Now, what's interesting is, although I changed careers numerous times, and actually it was funny that when I decided to go into career counseling, my friends were like, the irony of someone like myself who couldn't figure out what kind of job he was going into ended up helping people get jobs. But all of the elements have been there always, right? So the interconnectedness of working with people. I've been doing that ever since whenever. Again, I'm not a great closer when it comes to sales per se, but the idea of presenting ideas and listening to people, because part of sales is listening to people and finding out what they want. That's what I do now.
Wow.
So all of the elements have always been there.
Yeah.
Just not in the package that fit with me of who I am. And sometimes it just takes you to, have to reset everything like I had to, and then get an inspiration and try something out. But what's interesting is even within the same field is not everything is the same in the same field. What do I mean by that? Well, even here at UofT, we have different types of individuals who focus on different things in the career area. So I do strategy mostly, which is, a person who mostly knows what they want to do. They don't have to have an exact idea, but they mostly know. And I strategize with them of how to find a job, right? That's primarily what I do. And that's numerous ways of doing that. Everything from resume writing, LinkedIn, interviews, job search, and we'll go more into that, I'm assuming. But we also have on staff here what are known as career counselors. And they specialize in people who don't know what they want to do. So that's what I needed when I graduated, was I needed someone to sit down with me and look at all the dots and try to help me connect that. Okay. Now, I've done that before in previous roles. I'm not currently doing that here because I focus mostly on strategy. But within that field, you need an individual who has a very counseling approach with their mentality and the way their style.
Yeah.
And my style is very good with strategic. I love problem solving. I love to, figure out things and do deep dives into finding solutions. But our counselors here sometimes take a very different approach. And it's not that one is better than the other. It's one is better depending on the situation.
Exactly. Wow, that's actually a great. So I once booked an appointment, right? So I booked 2 appointments at once. And I came to my first appointment, I was like advised to to take another course, right? And I went to another appointment and he was like, no, you don't take this course. Like, wait, what am I doing?
Different pieces of advice, right?
Yeah, different pieces of advice. So I was like, okay, I got to figure out, I got to actually sit down and just think about it. So I just,
and that's, part of what our job is to help, be a sounding board. Also, we can see above the situations to help people figure that out as well. So it's very multi-dimensional in what we do. And it also depends on the populations that you're working with too. So when I worked in not-for-profit, for example, we had different programs. Now, ironically, my program was career exploration. I'm certified in a bunch of personality tests and psychological devices. So I used to help people who were lost and, help them figure themselves out. But I would take that from a very tactical approach in that. But I had individuals who worked specifically with newcomers. I had people who worked specifically with youth. There was a women's program. And each of those programs required a certain temperament. So we all were career in one sense. It was very different.
It's very different, for sure.
And what's interesting and where I noticed is when I was working not-for-profit, we used to be funded by the federal government, and then they switched the funding to the provincial government. And when that switch happened, my program, which I loved, was removed. And we used to have specialists back in the day. Like I was a specialist in career exploration, like I was a specialist in youth, specialist in newcomers. That was all removed. And we all became like giant Walmarts instead, in which all programs were put together.
Yeah.
And instead of me specializing in one area, I was working with everybody.
Why?
And then that's when I began to find out that my fit wasn't a fit with everybody.
Yeah.
Again, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's good to kind of figure that out. So what my point behind this is within the same industry, you can have very different dynamics. So I often sometimes say a person doesn't necessarily have to do a full 180 shift. Like I've had people like, I'm not sure what I want to do. I'm going to completely go from computer programming to truck driving, like a complete shift, right? Sometimes you need to do what's called a lateral shift, in which you're still within the same bubble-ish area, just step to the side.
Yeah.
And I've done that numerous times in my career. And even though shifting in my second career life as a career into career, and I've had multiple titles, been a career consultant, strategist, it was even called a career counselor at one point. And even though that was a major shift for me, it was still a lateral / 180 shift in the sense that, yes, I did completely switch areas, but all the skill sets, personality, and experiences I had accumulated by that point served me greatly into what I do now. So it was not like I ditched everything.
Yeah.
I just reinvented what I was doing.
Exactly. Yeah. So we'll move on to the next question. The next question is there any strategies on choosing the right career path for yourself? Like, how do people choose it? Like you said, like there are some like activities that you should do before choosing your career, right?
Yeah.
Like,
so this is multidimensional. Like I said, I ran a 2-week program to help people figure this stuff out.
Yeah, I saw that on LinkedIn too.
Yeah,
so fun.
So I used to. So there's no one answer to this, but I will go into multiple answers for this because we all would like the one answer, and life teaches us. And trust me, I've been doing this for 20 years now. There is never one answer.
Exactly.
So sometimes an individual will have natural bends towards things. Like I said, I've always been a talker and a problem solver. I just needed time to figure out where that was going to fit. But for other individuals, they don't know. So sometimes we have parental influences, right?
Yeah.
We often see this here with students here, where students will say, the parents are like, you're being a doctor and that's it.
Especially international students.
That's it, right? Or you're an accountant, that's it, right? Go to computers, right? So we sometimes see that, and, we try not to get too involved with that, with, going against parents, because we don't want to do that. But we do help students try to explore themselves to figure things out. Sometimes students just don't know. And, so we often run like panel events. So I always advise, be a learning sponge. Learn as much as you can. And if you're thinking about an industry but not sure, talk to people who do that industry. That's what I did when I was thinking about going into career. I spoke to someone who actually did this for a living and said, I've never done this before. What is it like and what do you do? And give me an idea, right? So go to events, talk to people who do these things. There are personality assessments out there. Now, some people like them, some people don't. I'm not going to get into that right now. But I do know that did help me in the sense of confirmation of what I enjoyed doing. And it kind of made sense where I knew these things, but then finally I did a few assessments that said, yes, this is correct for you. But sometimes confirmation is also about what you don't like doing. And that part of confirmation is also discovering what is not for you. Like I said, that one job where I threw a party for myself, okay, that was a confirmation of don't do this for a living.
Yeah.
Okay. And ever since then, I've avoided those types of tasks. Not to say I won't do them, but I will never pick a job like that again because it's not who I am. And it's not where I can serve a company properly. And it's good to know that about yourself.
Yeah.
One of the greatest teachers out there, and I'm a huge advocate of this, one of the greatest, biggest teachers that any person could ever have is experience.
Just going there, working, and trying.
Try different things. Take chances and try something different. Experience is, and when we get into career, we'll talk more about this, of what employers actually look for in candidates, because I'm sure that's a big topic you want to talk about.
Sure.
But when it comes to figuring yourself out, and I'm doing that in air quotes, you don't know sometimes till you do something.
Oh, okay.
Like that horrible job that I had, until I actually did that position, I thought that was an option for me.
Oh, okay.
Because
now I understand.
Yeah, but it was in the wrong setting for me. So my personality type, there's a saying, forest versus trees. I'm a forest person in the sense of I like to oversee the entire picture and big things. Like when I work on a project, I like to look at the entire project, the beginning, the end, the whole thing, like the whole forest. Tree people look at the individual components.
Oh.
And I can do that, but it's not my strong set. So I'm really happy where I have great administrators because I can come up with projects, ideas, do all the planning, and then someone can book the rooms for me and, get the chairs and the catering and all that little tree stuff, which is immensely important. I'm happy because I can focus on my development and delivery.
Yeah.
The job I picked was a tree job in which it required extreme details, extreme, lots of Excel and things like that. And I discovered, I thought, because I'm a fairly organized person, that, this would be a great fit. Yeah, I'm not that type of organized.
Yeah.
You see, not that I'm saying I'm not organized. I'm not that type of organized. I'm organized in that to make sure that when I'm running, it runs well and that the check marks are there and all that kind of stuff. But when it came to the little tiny bit things, I discovered I need people to do that for me. Because not that I can't do it, but it drains me.
I understand that. Yeah.
So I didn't know that until I got that job. And then I went, oh,
it's not for me.
Not me. This job is sucking me dry. I wouldn't know that till it happened. But then experience is also a great teacher in trying things you've never done before.
How long it took you to actually know that this job is not for you?
Again, for this particular position, it's probably about 6 months.
6 months. Okay.
Now, I don't want to get, because there's a lot of other drama associated with it, because it was a small company, a lot of other things going on with it. But yeah, I started realizing, and then I started making mistakes. And the mistakes were not because I was, I don't want to say incompetent per se, but it wasn't a good fit for me. That because this job required so much extreme detail on stuff, that I was missing things because I normally don't get into that much detail when I deal with things. So yeah, it just wasn't a natural fit for myself. So experience for myself is one of the greatest teachers out there. For people who don't know what to do or aren't sure, do something. Try something. Get active. Not only is it going to be one of your greatest teachers to help you understand yourself and what you're fit for, what is not, and it is something you develop over time, it has so many other benefits. Like I said, when the jobs dissolved for me, I threw a party, but it did hit my confidence. But after I got a job that I enjoyed doing and started experiencing and trying things, those accomplishments gave me massive confidence.
Wow. Yeah.
One of the greatest statements of confidence. One of the greatest statements of confidence is, I did this. When a person can look at something they've done and said, I did this, I tried this, it is one of the greatest confidence achievements a person can have.
Yeah.
And whenever a person, regardless, everybody has some kind of something when they said, I did this. And they can look at that with a smile. If we can enhance that and develop those things in individuals, we can really help them out with their career.
100%. Okay. How did your diploma impact your future?
Well, like I said, I didn't do anything with it other than that there were elements within it that I used in other positions. So my diploma was like heavy in psychology. I took some psych courses, some forensics courses, other things like that. And although I didn't directly per se become a psychologist or anything like that, the psychological components of it I still use in my job today.
Yeah.
So there were components from that there.
But why criminal?
Just something I've always been fascinated with.
So you were just interested?
I always loved okay, so like many people, you like a movie and I want to try that, all right? So I've always loved gangster films and all that kind of stuff, right? So hey, let's learn about these people and why, what causes people to commit crime and all that kind of stuff, right?
No, I understand taking the course. I also took psychology course in my second semester, right? Just out of interest. But criminal major, I'm why?
Yeah, and it's just something that again, mostly because I grew up watching crime movies and stuff like that. It's just an interest I had when I was a kid.
Oh, okay.
And then just thought I'd do a thing with it. But the problem was I didn't ever stop to think. Right, I was just doing, right, and that's why it took me 5 years to go back to school again, because when I was doing my original stuff, I just did.
Yeah.
We had a career center. I didn't know about that. I never got help. I just kind of did,
Yeah.
and just kind of saw what happened. I was always in leadership roles. For example, like I was a president of a club for 2 years at the school when I was in university. So I always fell into like leadership style roles. I was also working as well. So, but yeah, I thought this is interesting, but I never thought about like, what am I going to do with this when I'm done? I don't know.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't until that horrible job that I lost, and then I actually saw a career person did I actually sit down and say, yeah, I got to think about this, and actually on my own choose to start to put things together. And it was after that, literally that moment when I saw them talking, I said, that's what I want to do. And that moment that I reached out to them and said, hey, can I talk with you about what you do? That's when things really changed for me in my life. Because it was for the first time that I, didn't float into something or I just tried something. I actually intentionally said, let's look at this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when everything started falling into place, is when I actually started taking control of things instead of just trying things. Again, I love trying things. Experience, again, is the greatest teacher, but you just can't do for the sake of doing sometimes. Sometimes you have to say, why am I doing this? And I never really had that conversation with myself until that moment. And then once I did, that's when everything just kind of aligned.
But how about university education? Do you think it's like important in these, like, do you think it will be important in these coming years?
Yes, I mean, well, so for a lot of employers, they do require some kind of post-secondary education, for sure, when it comes to for hiring. But from what I've seen in the field, and one of the jobs I had done in the past is, like I said, I had multiple positions. Is I was a contract recruiter at one point as well. So one of the positions I was working at, I was working for a small company in which they would have me help out sometimes do recruitment stuff. Mm-hmm. So I would process like tons of resumes and stuff like that. And the rethink has to be that education is extraordinarily important, but it's not the only deciding factor.
Okay.
And that's something that students, in my opinion, need to be aware of. Mm-hmm. So one of the most uncomfortable conversations I have with students usually happens starting March, April-ish through till September. Because what will happen is a student will come to me and they've either are about to graduate or they just graduated.
Yeah.
And they come to me and say, and it's their first time seeing us, right? They've never seen us before. They spent 4 years doing their studying and everything. And it's the first time seeing us. Either they're just about to or they just have graduated. And they come to me and say, I want to get a job. I just graduated. Let's get some money.
I have 4.0 GPA. Everything is ready.
And then I'll say, great, let me look at your resume. And I'll look at their resume, and this is when the uncomfortable conversation comes in. Mm-hmm. Because I'll look at their resume, and all I'll see on that resume is their education. And I'll say to them, so I see on your resume here, we have your education listed. What else have you done in the past 4 years? Mm-hmm. And they'll look at me and say, well, I studied. And then I'll say, that's great, and good job on graduating and all that. But what else have you done? Well, I've studied.
Oh.
Have you worked at all? No.
Oh my God.
Have you taken any volunteer jobs? No. Did you join a club? No. Did you do a case competition? Anything of practical components that we can put on this resume? No.
Oh my God. Yeah.
So here's why these things get uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. As I said, I've done recruitment. With the job I currently do, both with the ANCC and management, I meet tons of recruiters, and I'm talking to recruiters all the time, the ones who directly look at your resume. Just last month, I ran a panel of recruiters asking them directly what they look at when they're hiring people.
Wow.
And here's why it gets uncomfortable. Because this student, regardless of GPA, who has that empty resume, is competing for the same jobs against another student I just met who's been working for 4 years straight, was a president of a club, did a case competition, did volunteer work, and all this other stuff. Mm-hmm. So we have student A, who regardless of GPA, they have this resume, but that's it, just their GPA. And student B, who's got that as well, plus work experience, plus leadership experience, practical applications of their theoretical knowledge. Which one gets the phone call? Student B every single time. Mm-hmm. As I mentioned earlier, experience is not only the greatest teacher, it is the greatest thing employers look for.
Yeah.
And it's not that education's bad, not by any means, but by itself. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry for disturb you. I was delusional before coming here. I was like, so I go to University of Toronto. I'm going to University of Toronto. Definitely, if I go to any restaurant, or maybe like the restaurant was like my, like, I don't know, like the last option, right? So I was like, if I go to any job and say I go to UofT, they will definitely hire me. I'm like, okay. And then I came here. Like first semester, I didn't do anything except studying, right? It was like so hectic. And then in the winter break, I started like, creating my resume and applying for jobs. I'm like, I applied for Walmart. I applied for Tim Hortons. I'm like, getting rejections. Wait, what? Like, I go to UofT and I get rejections from Tim Hortons? That hurts. Because like, as an international student, we pay a lot of money, right? And what's your opinion on that? Like, do you think students who graduate UofT have privilege, like in what do you call like hiring process?
So I'm not going to get into that per se because it depends on hiring managers and stuff like that. But what I will say this week's convocation week, how many students are graduating with a diploma?
Like a lot of people.
15, 20,000?
Yeah.
All says UofT.
Yeah.
And that's UofT. Ryerson. TMU, sorry. I used to call them Ryerson because that's where I used to work at. And that's at York. You have the colleges, right? All of them have diplomas.
Yeah.
So it's not that the education is wrong, not by any means whatsoever.
Oh, you have to stand out by something that you did during your education year. Okay.
Here's the reality of the situation. Again, as someone who does career, and I probably see between 200 to 300 resumes a year here at UofT that I critique. I do a lot. That job that you or someone else wants to apply to that you found on whatever website, LinkedIn, Indeed, or whatever, you have to understand that that job you're applying to, your classmate, that person you sat beside every single day, is just applied to the same position. What makes you different than them?
Oh my God, yeah,
And I actually see this here. I have a student who comes to me and says, I want to apply to this job because when I do resume critiquing, one of my things is I want to see the position. I have to see the job they're applying to so I can make sure that they're fitting correctly to it. And I'll see the position, critique their resume, give them advice, and then the student comes right after them, is applying to the exact same position.
Exactly.
I see it all the time. And I get to see the literally who they're competing against.
Yeah.
So it's not that the education's, not worthwhile. No, none of that. I'm not saying that whatsoever. But by itself. Because, as you said, no one was looking at you. Because they were like, great, you're a university student. I just got 50 others right here in this pile as well. Applying for the same job as you. So it's, what else are you bringing to the table? And here's another difference as well. Education is fantastic, but unless you're in some kind of co-op internship program in which you get to actually try out the things, you have what's called theoretical knowledge, which means you know the stuff.
Yeah.
What the employer wants to say or see is, have you done the stuff? Right?
Yeah.
So knowledge is important. You need the knowledge, but have you used the knowledge? Or how have you used it? What are the practical things we can look at to say, well, here's what you've done? And that's why experience is everything. I look at experience like currency. The more of it you have, the more you can negotiate with. The less of it you have, the less you can negotiate with, because this is the way the world works. I mean, we want people who know what they're doing. And knowing is not only the head knowledge, but it's the, like I said, I can do this. I have done this before.
Oh, okay.
So when I do get those students who come to me with the blank resumes, and this does happen, I can't tell a student not to apply to a job. I will never do that. But I do know what their chances are competing against the student who came just before them, looking for the same position, who's got, 3, 4 times, 5 times the experience they do. So I often look at this like a person who's never exercised before, but wants to run a marathon. Okay. So let's say you get 2 people who want to run a marathon. All right. Yeah. One person who has been training for 4 or 5 years, and you have a person who's never trained before. You don't put them at the same level.
That's correct.
Okay. Because the one person who's trained before still needs to be enhanced and do some other stuff, but they've done similar things. So it's easier for them to be able to run the marathon versus a person who's never done it before. And students who have lots of theoretical book knowledge, but have never actually done it before, You just don't throw them out to start running because it's hard, right?
Yeah.
They don't know what it's like to actually try this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's tiring, all these things. So what I've done with these students before is I don't give up on anybody, but we start them realistically.
Mm-hmm.
That full-time permanent position, sure, we can go for those. I know statistically speaking, those are difficult to get, even for students who have lots of experience. So I think of a student I had this exact conversation with once. She was a management student, accountant, non-co-op. All the knowledge never worked. All right. So one of these ones, had this conversation with them, the uncomfortable conversation. And I said, listen, we're going to start looking for jobs, but in the meantime, your greatest barrier is the fact your resume has nothing on it. You need to get something on your resume. So I encouraged them to start looking at some temporary positions, get a temp job somewhere in accounting. All right. Because the thing about the temp position is they were, easier to get. Their qualifications aren't as high as a full-time permanent position at one of the big 4 accounting firms. So I said, just get something, right? And that's what she did. She got a temp position for 2 days a week in accounting.
Wow.
And I said, great, work at that hard, job search at the same time, right? Because you only get 2 days of work, you get 3 days to do other stuff, right? But what ended up happening is, because they kept coming to see me, is after 2 weeks, that 2 days a week became 3 days a week.
Oh, okay.
Because what they were doing was trying them out. The employer wanted to see, can you do this job? Can we trust you? So they tried them out. And then within about a month, they were at 5 days a week. They just kept increasing them. Okay. Now, this doesn't happen in every case, but in the student's case, it did because they were trying them out. And in many students, this is what I encourage is, who are in those situations, is to build up slowly. It can happen, but if you can get the experience now doing things, and experience doesn't actually mean in that diploma, whatever your diploma is going to say, it's something.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I ran a panel many years ago back actually at Ryerson. I keep getting mixed up. TMU there. And I had a recruiter from one of the larger banks in Canada. And what she said was, I don't care if you work at McDonald's. What I care about is what you did there that made you special.
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
Yeah. And the panel I just ran a month ago, one of the recruiters in that panel said that what she looks for in resumes is not the fact that you had the job, which is important. It's what you did there that made a difference. That's what she would look for.
Wow.
So this is why experience is so important to do things. Now, not only does this look good for employers, right, which is, primarily important, of course, but as someone who works with lots and lots of students, I can see the difference between students who have lots of experience versus those who don't. And what I mean by difference is in the sense of how they carry themselves, their confidence. That, again, one of the greatest confidence statements is, I have done this or I did this. And people who have experience can say that, and you could see it in them versus someone who hasn't before. So it benefits the person, the student, by saying, I can do this. I have done this. I've tried this before. There's just a difference with them. And the more someone does something, the more you can see the confidence and strength built inside them.
Yeah, got it. The next question is actually about GPA. Is GPA really important? What do you think?
Back to the original question of about your diploma.
Yeah.
So, in my experience, I have to say in my experience, so I don't know all of it, but from the employers I've worked with, do some look at GPA? Some do. Okay. But those tend to be very specialized industries in which they have a higher demand. So some samples, and these are just samples, not only limited to this. For example, someone getting into, say, capital market finance, work in the stock market, those types of things, right? Yeah, they're like, we need to see that high GPA because you're dealing with millions of dollars of contracts here, right? So I've seen that before. And I've spoken to some recruiters before that actually put a GPA cutoff thing in their application process where they actually
for just the GPA,
among other things, among other things. So I've seen that. I've seen that in some of the computer programming development side as well, where they're looking for that. Now again, I'm talking jobs. I'm not talking grad school here. Grad school's different. Grad school, you always need to have a high GPA for that. But when I'm talking about grad school, we're talking about employment. But for other areas of employment, again, back to my analogy I gave earlier. You have a student with a 3.8, 3.9 out of 4. You have a student with a 2.9 out of 4. Student A with a 3.8, 3.9 has never worked a day in their life. or barely worked. Student with a 2.9 has solid work experience for 4 or 5 years and did all this other stuff. As an employer, who do you pick?
I think this one.
Right? The one with the experience.
Yeah, with the experience.
And the reason, not in every case, right? Because GPA is important. But you have to understand from an employer perspective. When it comes to finding employment, there's two perspectives. There's the candidate, in this case the students, and the employers. And one difficult transition for a lot of students is understanding that their perspective of what they consider to be important can be different than the perspective what the employer finds important. So one of the jobs that I do when I'm working on resumes, interviews, whatever, is to translate what a person has done from student speak, which an employer may not find value in, to using the exact same examples, but changing the focus to what the employer might find valuable. Because it's all about perspective. Again, this goes back to my sales days, where when you're selling to a customer, you have to understand their perspective to sell your product, because different customers have different needs and desires. So it's understanding that, and employers are basically a customer in this case. You're trying to show them something that they're going to want to purchase, in this case, yourself for employment. So GPA is important, but it's a combination of both.
Work experience and GPA.
And it also depends on the industry and what else is being offered to the table. Okay, it's a combination of all of that put together that employers look at, and it really is varying depending upon position to position. But I tell students, no matter what you're doing, whether it's school, work, hopefully both, do the best you got to do. Give it all you can, and present the value. And that's the key thing, is value. GPA by itself to some employers is a number, among other things. So instead of just focusing on the number being the deciding factor of why they're going to hire you, which for a lot of employers, that's not the deciding factor in some cases, it's the value behind the number that's important. What did you have to do to achieve that number? See, many students don't go into that kind of information.
Oh, 100%. I didn't even know about it.
Yeah,
the value part.
Yeah, they just throw a number on there hoping that's the best. But you have to remember that for a lot of recruiters, they don't remember their own GPAs. How long has it been since they've been in school?
Yeah.
Right? The value is different. So I'm not saying ignore GPA, not by any means. It's if you're going to put it on there, just understand the number by itself may not carry value to the employer. It is up to the candidate to bring the value. Here's an example. One of the programs here on campus is the MIB program, Management International Business Program, right? I think like 10% of management students get into it or something like that, right? It's a really hard program to get into. Now, I know that if you get into MIB, you've worked, okay? Do employers know that? No. So if you just simply say MIB program on your resume, that doesn't translate to them. So what I did once for a student who really, because I understand the value of this program, is instead of just slapping it on there and, assuming the employer knows what it means, but they don't, because they're not from UofT, instead, we had them put on their resume that they were accepted into a program that only 10% get into. We actually added that. That's the value.
Got it. Yeah.
Right? It's not the 3 letters themselves that bring the value. It's what those 3 letters mean, and to get into that.
And what are the mistakes that students should avoid, while applying for a job, or maybe in the hiring process?
Oh, so this is a whole other conversation we'll get into. Okay, let me just get a drink here. So as I said, I do probably 200 to 300 resumes a year. Okay? And the biggest mistake I see, there's 2 of them, actually, they fall in together. The number one mistake I would say that most people make, and this is also when I used to work not-for-profit too and all these other things, is using the exact same application for every job you're applying to.
That's what I did in winter, and I didn't get any.
Nothing, right?
Nothing.
So I had a student not too long ago come and see me, and she's like, Derek, I sent out 70 resumes, not a single phone call.
Yeah.
And actually, that's a lower number. I've had others that have been higher. And the first question I'll say to them is, are you using the same application for every job that you're applying to? And they were like, yeah, is that bad? And I will say, how many phone calls did you get? None. That's your answer. So why is the same application the worst mistake you can make? Because it's more than just the same application. It's more than that. For example, if you're applying to 70 jobs and the numerous jobs that you apply to, you don't read those jobs.
That's true.
You're just finding stuff and going apply, and you have no idea what you're applying to, which is what I'll get to in a second as the second mistake. But if you're just randomly sending out applications, you have no idea what you're applying to begin with. And you also have to understand how recruitment is done these days. So when you're applying to a job, everybody understands you're not the only candidate. But do you really understand what you mean by you're not the only candidate? If you found a job on some online portal, which is where most people are looking these days, again, LinkedIn, Indeed, there's many others out there. When you hit that apply button, you have to understand that you're number 1 out of 4 or 5, 6, 700 people that apply to that job. When I ran that panel just last month, I asked the recruiters, well, there's 4 of them, on average, how many applications do they get per position? The numbers ranged from 400 to 2,000.
What? 2,000?
Yeah. One of them used to work for a bank. So,
400 to 2,000.
That's on average.
It's crazy.
That these 4 recruiters said. That was the range that I heard from them. Now, this is always going to be smaller. And believe it or not, there's going to be more. I know someone who works in finance for one of the larger banks in Canada. And they say they get about 5,000 per posting. So, what happens next, right? That's the key thing is what happens next. And why does this random multiple application thing do not work? No one reads those applications. First, normally when you apply for a job, you have to go to an online portal, right? This is known as an applicant tracking system. Every company has their different versions of them, although I found out UofT doesn't use one. I wish we would catch up on the times for that, but most companies do. And you either have to fill out a profile or your resume is processed through it. So there's one or two things that happen. And what happens is they use some kind of algorithm, usually based upon keywords, and it screens out the resumes.
ATS?
Yeah, the ATS, applicant tracking system. So depending on how it's set up, 70 to 80%.
Gone.
When I had my job at TMU, I asked my boss what my numbers looked like. So he told me that they posted online and they got 500 applicants. I was in that pile. Their ATS deleted the vast majority of them to only 70 were left.
Oh, 430 people were just deleted?
Gone, just like that.
Oh my God.
And this is common. So the way the system works is it uses keyword algorithms found within the posting. The postings, and I'll get to the postings as the second big mistake people make, but it has key terminologies, key phrases, key things they're looking for. Well, if you're just using the same application for every single posting and just throwing the same thing out there all the time, you're not hitting the things they're looking for.
Yeah.
And it's not like they have a shortage of candidates. Now, the next level of screening, so again, back to my time at Ryerson there, I was part of that 70. Well, from that 70, it went down to 20. So when I used to do this as well, I'd get a stack of 120 and get it down to 20 to 30 people. So what happens next is your average recruiter will then scan the resumes by hand. The average recruiter, and this is the range I've heard recently, can look at your resume between 3 to 5 seconds.
Your whole life?
That's it.
5 seconds.
I can do it in 5. I can do one in 5. That's what I was trained to do. My training when I was doing recruitment was it was on a computer. So I would get a posting that would pop up on the screen, and I would read that posting for 2 minutes. I had 2 minutes to read the posting. Then they would take the posting away, and then a resume would pop up, in this case, 6 seconds. And I'd read it for 6 seconds. And I'd get 5 resumes, 6-second scans each. Out of those 5, I had to pick 2 that I would interview. And until I consistently scored getting those proper 2 all the time, I was not allowed to do it live until I did that.
Whoa. Is that how it worked?
That's my training.
Okay.
But there's different ways that it's done, right? But speaking to recruiters, again, I try to talk to them all the time. Yeah, that panel I ran last month, one said 3 seconds. Another one, a panel I ran a couple months ago, said 4 seconds. I could do it in 5. Now, you might think, oh my gosh, that's so quick. Well, let's do some math. If I have 120 resumes on my desk, and let's say, because you think, again, perspectives, right? The perspective of the candidate think they're going to spend at least a minute on my resume, right? A whole minute, right? Well, if I had 120 resumes on my desk, how long is that? That's 2 hours. Just screening resumes. No recruiter's going to do that. You don't have time for that. 30 seconds.
But
that's 1 hour.
But why? Like they get paid full time for just recruiting
Because
people.
they have so many positions they have to fill. This is just the first part of recruitment.
Oh.
See, you need to get rid of the bulk of these individuals to get down to the ones you want to interview. All right, that's where you're spending your time, is the final candidates that you're going to interview. So you just need to get rid of you just need to trim off all the main stuff. It's like someone who's like doing, let's say wood turning or something, right? You want to create a vase out of a chunk of wood. You need to cut off all the top parts of the wood first to get to the good stuff.
Yeah.
That's all we're doing. So 5 seconds. What are we looking for? We work like an ATS. We know what the job is. We know what we're looking for.
Yeah.
And if your resume does not have those things, and here's the key thing, if I can't find it easily, bye.
Yeah.
It's not like there's a shortage of candidates, So this is why this random SAM applications, multiple things at once,
Does not work.
So that's problem one. Don't do that, okay? The second problem links directly to this. If problem one is you're not the only candidate out there and you're using the same application every time, the second big mistake people make is actually not knowing what they're applying to begin with.
Oh.
If you're 70 positions, 50, whatever, sending out the resumes, you're not reading the job posting in detail. When I do resume critiques here, the one thing I'll always tell students is send me the posting you're applying to. Because I need to see that job so I can know what you're applying to, know what the position is about, and see how you match. If I don't know what the job is, I can't tell you if you're a fit. So the next big mistake people make is not reading the posting over in detail. See, what people tend to do with postings is this. They'll look at the job title, which is probably, you probably did this, right? You look at the job title, and then you hop down right to the qualifications.
Yeah.
You'll see bachelor's degree, communication skills, Excel, analytical ability, apply. Right? That's what most people do.
Yeah.
And they skip a lot of the stuff in there, not even knowing what the job was. So one of the ways, a great way students can get experience here on campus is something called work-study positions. Get work-study positions. These are fantastic opportunities to work for departments on campus. During the last round of work-study positions, I had a student who wanted to apply to a couple of bio-research positions. So they sent me the two jobs. Both of them said research assistant. Okay, so the job titles were virtually the same. Qualifications, pretty much the same stuff. Now, the one position for research assistant was basically doing literature review. You're helping a master's student with their thesis. You had to do some literature review, write a report, blah, 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 send it on. He was happy with that. I read the second posting, and I said, so how good are you with rats? And he looked at me and went, what? I said, well, let's scroll down here. And under the job duties, which is where most people skip is the duties, it said, this is a live lab position. You'll be working with live animals. Must be comfortable dealing with rats. It clearly said that. And I said, how are you with the rats? He goes, I was squeamish with the cockroaches in my bio lab. I said, you working with rats? He's like, no. Didn't read the posting.
Yeah.
Did not read the job.
Kind of sad.
Do not use what's called the quantity approach to job search, which is what we've been talking about here. Quantity will not work. Choose a quality approach to job search in which you take your time to read the posting over, understand the field, understand the job, understand the company. I always try to answer two questions in a posting. The question I try to answer with a student or when I used to have clients is, one, what is this actual job you're applying to? Like, let's actually discuss it in normal language and understand what you're doing. And I just gave you that breakdown for those two positions. One was doing a literature review. The other one was working with rats, okay?
Yeah.
Then I do look at the qualifications, but now I have context of how that's going to be used within the job posting.
Yeah.
So quality approach is what to do.
Yeah. So we'll just go quickly through the questions. We're running out of time a bit. So I'll give like a few questions about it, and then we'll move to the teaser questions, okay? So the next question is like, what's the purpose of cover letter? Why employers like ask for cover letter?
Great cover letters. Okay, awesome question. So, unless otherwise stated by the organization, include a cover letter 100% of the time. Okay, unless otherwise stated. There are some companies that don't take them any longer.
Oh,
And
so if it's optional, you have to.
No,
like,
it's not. If they give you the option, I say include it. There are some companies that actually say do not include a cover letter.
Oh, okay.
Okay, they'll have you fill out their online application instead. Now, although I do say include it 100% of the time unless otherwise stated, this current statistics that I've researched, and there's different studies on this, right? But the ones that I've researched state that only 30 to 50% of cover letters get read, and that's it. That's it. 30 to 50% get read. That's it. When I was doing the recruitment stuff, I remember that I had 2 hiring managers in front of me. So I did the initial processing, and then I had the resumes. I handed it to the 2 recruiters. And I asked them, I said, you guys look at cover letters? One said yes, one said no, but they were screening for the same job. So depending which pile you're in, one looked at it, one didn't, right? So why didn't they? When I used to do the recruitment, I called them giant generic bricks of information. Mm-hmm. That was the problem. Mm-hmm. The problem with cover letters and why so little get read is that people approach the cover letter the same way they do their resume. It's just a giant brick of stuff.
Just scan it?
It's just stuff.
Okay.
It's the same generic stuff that everybody else has said. Mm-hmm. They're opening, all right? I've written a PowerPoint on how to do cover letters, and it's always funny when I do this. I'll say to the students, what's the problem I have with the following 4 sentences? And I'll list off 4 opening sentences in a cover letter. And it's things like, I'm a 4th-year psychology student wishing to apply to this job. I'm a recent graduate. I found this position on Indeed and wish to apply to it. It is my absolute pleasure to apply to this position as I have the interests and personality for the job. And I say, these are not good. Yeah. And everybody looks at me and goes, why? That's how I start mine off with. And I said, that's the problem. 90% of people say the same thing in cover letters.
You have to include something personal, as you said.
So your cover letter is your narrative. It's your story. It's your chance to take the technical components or details from your resume and give your story in your own words to the employer. Mm-hmm. The reason so many get skipped is people either, one, just write very generically, and it's the same thing they've written to every other company, where they even sometimes forget to change the company name. Okay, we've seen that's happened. I've heard it. I've seen it. Mm. Or they're throwing irrelevant information on there that have nothing to do with the job. Mm-hmm. So when you're writing your cover letter, I always advise doing what's called a hook opening. Instead of saying that you're a 4th year or whatever student, whatever, they all know this. Instead of saying I'm interested in this job at the beginning, they know this. You've said nothing new. Why are you applying for the job to begin with? Not that you're interested. Why are you interested? Mm-hmm. Start off your cover letter with something interesting that's unique to you to answer the question of why. Why do you want to do this? Mm-hmm. What led you here? This is something that I know what I would read and go, oh, this is a different approach. This allows a person to give a bit of personality and motivation, which is unique. Yes, you apply to the job, but I leave that to the last sentence of the opening paragraph because you want to introduce, 1, your motivations, 2, what you're bringing to the position, and then you apply to the position. Then in your cover letter, give a couple of distinct, specific examples that match that position. Mm-hmm. On your cover letter, ask yourself a question. Why am I putting this here? Remember, there's 2 perspectives in job search, yours and the employer's. What does it matter to them about this experience that you're giving to them? Mm-hmm. All right? Ask yourself that question. Not only do you want to give the experience, and I mentioned this earlier, is what actual impact did you have in that experience? Mm-hmm. Accomplishments, achievements. This is what employers like to see. Not the fact that you show up to work every day. What did you do there that made that difference, right? You might work at McDonald's, whatever. What did you do there that made you special? Put that in your cover letter, mm-hmm. right? You always want to be professional, but you want to make a connection. Now, that connection is relative to the position you're applying to. For example, if you're going to healthcare versus being an accountant, mm-hmm. you're going to approach this very differently, okay? Yeah. So it is about relevance. But one of the biggest mistakes I see students make when it comes to their job search is sounding like everybody else and not taking a chance and showing and stretching to show the employer what they can do, and what they can offer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, got it. So we'll just go through the questions, the teaser questions, and then we'll wrap up the podcast. Mm-hmm. And we're skipping some questions, but if I don't know, if people ask, maybe we do the second episode
sure.
or whatever.
Yeah, there's lots to talk about here.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions left. So yeah. So the question is, how's Canadian job market now?
So that's a tricky one because it depends on the day of the week, and whatever information I'm going to give you now will be irrelevant by the time this gets posted. Okay. So from what I can understand, the market's going through an adjustment. Okay. Mm-hmm. We're going through the post-COVID adjustment right now. So during COVID, we saw some areas in huge demand, other areas dropped off, right? So areas that dropped off during COVID, of course, was anything to do with people, right? Yeah. Service, retail, anything like that died, okay? What went up? Anything to do with tech. Because we're all stuck at home. I need a computer that works. Right?
Yeah.
We needed cloud-based services that could handle the vast volume of people, right?
Yeah.
Because we're all stuck at home.
Mm-hmm.
But what happened? We all went back to work.
Yeah.
So we've been seeing this readjustment where not everybody's at home anymore, or the technology's caught up, or the technology has changed. And we've all heard about the layoffs in some of the tech fields.
Yeah.
Because they hired all these people, they no longer need these people. But then we say, well, everybody wants to get out now. So we need people now in the service industry. Oh, everything's super expensive. Maybe not as many as we thought we needed. And so there's a bouncing around adjustment happening. Okay.
That's why like the job market is a bit low and people like kind of like struggling to get a job. Is that?
Well, it's like I said, it's going through an adjustment where there's some areas of low, but there's always going to be areas of high. Now, I've been doing this, like I said, for 20 years. So I was a career counselor during the economic crash of 2008. Okay, so I was working with people unemployed who lost. Now, back in 2008, what got killed off? The manufacturing industry. I had lineups of people who worked at warehouses looking for work because that got destroyed and they had to readjust into new areas. So the labor market's always going to have readjustments and fluxes. So what does a person do? Some people can stick through and see what's going to happen. Some people can look ahead and see where's the market shifting and try to future-proof themselves. Others might need to do a reinvention.
Oh.
But there's jobs out there. There's always jobs out there.
Oh. Okay.
Okay. But this might require some individuals to do what I call the lateral shift, where they just might shift industries, shift companies, maybe get retrained in a couple different areas to match up to what's being in demand now compared to what was before. Others might need a complete career shift. But there is always opportunity. I mean,
abundance mindset.
You know, is there some rough going on right now? Yeah, people are struggling. Things are expensive.
Still, there are some jobs.
You know, but there's always positions out there. People are needing. Now, does that mean that a person can get their quote unquote ideal position right now? In some cases, maybe not. They might need to take what's called a survival job while they rebuild themselves. That might happen. Others just need to take a different mindset. This is where we encourage people to then step outside of the standard job search methods of just Indeed, just LinkedIn. You know, instead of using LinkedIn's job board, why not use LinkedIn to reach out to people in fields that you might be interested in? 80% of people are still finding jobs through connections. So instead of doing the blind resume search, why not spend some time making the connections and seeing what other industries might have to be there for you? There's always options.
For sure. And it's kind of like quite funny question. What's the best job in the world?
The one that makes a person satisfied at the end, that they can say, I did this with a smile on their face.
So do you prefer money or, the salary or the satisfaction?
That depends on the individual.
Okay.
Right? Both are needed for satisfaction, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Some people get satisfaction after getting their salary. Some people like get satisfied while working in their job.
Yeah, I've had students come up to me, and when I say, what kind of job you want, they're like, oh, one that makes me tons of money. And I'll say, okay, great, go do high commission sales. Right?
Yeah.
You know, that makes lots of money. It's a hard job. It's not for everybody, you know. So there is no correct answer for that universally. It's more of what's for the individual.
Got it.
Okay. And some people, what would they realize throughout their life is that they change who they are.
100%. Yeah.
Money is needed, right? We have to survive. We need our food, all that kind of stuff, right? But what that looks like for one person is different than another person. Everybody's got different needs. So what I advise people to do is not get fixated on one specific thing. Instead, have a flexible, open mindset that you learn and grow from. Understanding that what you're saying now is not what you're saying 10 years from now.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so in that case, we'll wrap up the podcast for today. We're almost done. 1 hour and 2 minutes. I think it's okay. People who listened until the end, thank you so much. And thank you for coming and sharing your insights for people, for students especially who are watching us right now. And a lot of people actually commented on the video who I made with Raymond Grinnell. We also talked about the career, right? He also works as a calculus professor for 30, half of his life, I guess. So Thank you so much for coming. Yeah.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you for coming out.
Yeah, this is the end of the podcast.
Excellent. Well, have a good day, everyone, and thanks for listening.
Yeah, thank you.